हाँ हाँ, कर दे कर दे। और देख ये ओबीएस खोल, एक मिनट। ओबीएस, और यहाँ पे सीन है ना, उस पे प्लस कर, विंडो कैप्चर के बाजू में जो सीन, बाजू में, ये जो बाजू वाला, हाँ, लेफ्ट लेफ्ट लेफ्ट, वहां प्लस कर। मैं व्हाट्सएप पे तुझे एक भेजता हूँ इमेज। ये डाउनलोड करके वो सीन में ये लगा दे। अरे कुछ भी लिख दे, बैकग्राउंड लिख दे, कुछ भी लिख दे, हाँ। अरे चलेगा। हम्म। सीन में डबल क्लिक कर दो बैकग्राउंड पे। नहीं हो रहा कुछ? अभी जान देना, वो ठीक है, अभी चलेगा। वो उसमें वो ऐसा आता है कि हम थोड़ी देर के लिए कुछ लोग को वेट कर रहे हैं, तो वॉलपेपर जैसा कुछ दिखा दे इसमें, इसीलिए।
हाँ, अंकित भाई का मैसेज आ रहा है, म्यूट करो ग्रुप।
सुशांत,
अरे यूट्यूब पे मेरे को कुछ काम का लगा तो मैं व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप में लिखूंगा, बराबर ना?
व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप में मतलब सीधा अगर कुछ आ रहा है क्वेश्चन वैसे तो इसमें डाल दो।
So hello guys.
Hi, hello everyone. We'll be starting in about 2 to 3 minutes from now. Good evening, ma'am. I think you're muted.
What is Radio DIICT? How are you guys doing?
Ma'am, we're doing great actually. We
Nobody
have
said that.
recently
No student says that.
I mean, I think like at least for me personally, it's been better than the last semester. Maybe it's because I'm just used to it, or I don't know. But I think all of us are looking forward to coming back on campus very soon. So we're hoping we'll soon be on campus. Let's see. Okay, ma'am, I think we'll wait for another 2-3 minutes. After that, we'll begin so that a few more people will join. Okay, so hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into Radio Club DAIICT. We are so Radio Club DAIICT is basically just a bunch of enthusiasts. We are a group of music jockeys and radio jockeys, and we've been hosting interviews for poems and podcasts and things like that. And today we are here with you to talk about the F word of the 21st century, which is feminism. And joining with us today is Professor Shweta Garg. She is a member of the faculty at the DAIICT. She holds a PhD in English from IIT Roorkee. She is interested in gender studies and performance studies, and she teaches courses such as language and literature, introduction to narratology, introduction to drama, and women's writing at DAIICT. She's a creative writer and a visual artist, and she's been exploring narrative art for some time now, and she's exhibited her artworks at several art shows. And so it is with immense pleasure that I invite Shweta ma'am with us here today. Good evening, ma'am. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing great. I mean, I'm just saying I'm not doing great. I miss college.
I think that is everybody on campus at the moment. Yeah. All right. So, ma'am, I think before we begin, I think it's extremely important that we define the topic that we're talking about today, that is feminism. And I understand that feminism has had a lot of definitions throughout its history, and I think they're all overlapping, but nobody ever seems to have like a common this thing, a common they will say that this is it. Like I think everybody has different meanings of feminism for them. And I think before we begin, I would want you to tell us what it means for you.
So, I mean, I like the fact that you call it the F word, and it is the F word, but it's more like an F bomb, because it's like, do you hold that bomb or do you drop that bomb? Because it's uncomfortable either ways, and not just for men. I mean, that's a different story, even for women. So I come from a generation when we were younger, like, much younger, it was cool to say I'm a feminist. And then I realized that, when I was in college, one would be very apologetic, and say very meekishly that, I'm not a feminist. I believe everybody is equal and I don't hate men. So basically it was a plea for the outside world that like me, I'm not an angry person, like me. So I understand that there are very conflicting ideas. And then the minute you talk about feminism, people want to talk about men haters, people want to talk about pseudo-feminist and like all sorts of issues. So that's why it's an F word, but it's also an F bomb. So you asked me, what does it mean for me? And what does it generally mean for people, right? So it actually means that you believe in a principle which espouses equality, equity in different sexes. So we are not just saying that there are two sexes or two genders. We are saying that, okay, sexuality and gender, it's like a spectrum, and men and women could be opposite end of that pole, but between that, there are a lot of things that is possible, right? So feminism is about understanding that, accepting that, believing that. But it's not just about sexuality. It's also about other kind of inequality which happens in the society. And feminists say that this is not okay. We are not okay with gender discrimination. We are not okay with discrimination based on sexuality, but we are also not okay with racial discrimination or with discrimination based on caste or any other identity matter. So to put a holistic view, that is a feminist who believes in the principles of equity and equality. So that's it.
Yes, ma'am. I think there has been a lot of debate on the word itself. And at least recently, I've seen a lot of people say things like, if you're talking about equality so much, like why does the name have feminism? Like, why is the name feminism? Why is it related to femininity? Why don't you say something like humanism? Now, would you like to say something about that? Like,
yeah, you can call it humanism, you can call it chocolate, you can call it vanilla. At the end of it, what is it that you want to gain? The fact is, we call it feminism because feminism is a political movement. Okay, humanism had its own benefit, its own time and period in the history of Western philosophical thinking. Humanism was a thing, okay? But it's feminism which asked these uncomfortable issues. So the biggest principle of humanism is universal goodness. But the fact is that you believe in universal goodness, but you don't really implement it. Feminists are those who go into the ground, the grassroots, and ask these questions that, this is not available to us. All these lofty principles that you're talking about is not really being implemented. So it's the feminists who go and do actually that dirty work. It's possible that earlier on, when you look at the movement, and I tell that to people again and again, that when you call yourself a feminist, be aware it's a political stand. It's not something about, feeling good about yourself or feeling sexy about, calling oneself a feminist. It's a political stand. So humanism is not about that. It's feminism because they are the one to start it, okay? Earlier, they were called the suffragettes because, when the history of women's revolution and the day that we are talking about, it's International Women's Day. So the history of Women's Day itself is based on that, women in different countries in Europe and in America, mostly in Russia, they went on streets, thousands of women, lakhs of women, asking for, equal wage, asking for right to, earn money, respectable income, and right to vote. That is right to be recognized as a citizen of their country, respectively. So that is the roots of feminism. It always was political. So we can't call it humanism or anything else. If anybody else comes with a better term, because, terms also evolve, we would follow that. But, it can't be humanism, for instance.
Right. Absolutely, ma'am. So, revolving around the same dispute, there are people who would say things like, okay, like this is feminism, so it's just a woman's issue. And, especially like if you're talking about men, they're going to say, this is a woman's issue and we have nothing to do with this, it's your own problem, you take care of it, things like that, ma'am. What is your stand on that?
What is your stand on that? What is anybody's stand on that? So where do men come from? Like, are they downloaded from torrent websites? Where do human beings come from? They come from their mother's bodies. So all those who say that this is not our issue, I do not know. Maybe they forgot where their origins are, is what I would like to say. very politely. Otherwise, I'm not that polite. So every man is affected by how women live. As simple as that. So I am a mother of a son, and my son he will be 9 next month. I mean, just in about next month. So the rights which I want for a girl, I want the same rights for my son, for a boy. So if I would say that a woman should have a right to decide what she wants to do with life, I want the same sort of rights for my son also. So why should he not, want to stay back home and look after his kids if he wants to, for instance? Or why should he be a victim of toxic, patriarchy or toxic masculinity and equate his success and worth of being a man is how much his paycheck is? So you understand. So, the amount of money a man earns is amount of masculinity he earns in our country. So why do we do that? So, when feminists are those who are supposed to question that, and feminist men, if they are, as I said, gang up with us, it's good for them. It's good for us. It's good for everybody. So it's harming them as much as it's harming us. Yeah.
Right. Yes, I think this is the whole discourse of gendering of roles, even at home and elsewhere. You see dialogues at schools, and especially when you are seeing portrayal in the mainstream media, which is going to be influencing us so much. I mean, we're always surrounded by everything. We're surrounded by advertisements. We're surrounded by movies and TV series, and I think it's extremely necessary for the mainstream media to depict things in a proper way. And instead, I've seen many of these portray just or propagate the same stereotypes that we see at home, the gendering of roles and things like that. Ma'am, what do you have to say about that?
See, I like the fact that you have this belief that media should do so and so, right? So we are living in a time when we do not know what media should and should not do. At least they do not know what they should and should not do. But then at the same time, I think we live in a very interesting time. We have media, which is like mainstream media, which is considered as, fifth pillar of the democracy or fourth, depending on who speaks. But then we have independent media, we have internet. So, we have social media, we have small independent media houses, for instance. So I would also see that if there is a culture, there is also a very strong kind of counter culture. So there is toxic masculinity, through objectification of women. Then you also have a counter culture which questions it. And I believe that these little voices will very soon, or perhaps, one day would become larger voices someday. So as far as the status quo concerned right now, we all know, right? We all know that we learn the engendering, as you call it, happens because we are heavily influenced by what media shows us. So while growing up, what role models did you have? So I'm talking about me, my role. I didn't have a role model. So, when we were young, we didn't have mobile phones like you guys did. So we would do role play of Ramayana, and I would never get to be Ram because Ram has to be a guy. So I would be Sita, and I'm not like Sita. Okay, Sita doesn't have much to do, and that was my impression of what Sita is. Obviously, that may not be true. So the guy I would play with say that be Shurpanakha. And I said, actually that Shurpanakha really has much more role to play. So you understand, we have we have either the angel of the house, or we have the terrible, I don't want to use that word, who comes and does horrible things, So you have the, angel or the vamp in that case. So what role models did we have when we were growing up? So yes, I mean, so we condition, we instill the same thing and we propagate it. We live that throughout our life.
Absolutely, ma'am. And I think, but there has been, I think I've seen media also portray, I think there are movies that are doing great job, especially regional films. I think very recently we've had this film called The Great Indian Kitchen. It's a Malayalam movie, and I think it has brought up issues to the forefront. I think you wrote an article about it as well on your blog, right, recently. And there have been other movies like I think in Gujarat we had Hilaru 2 years ago, and I think we've seen many such movies like that. I think recently even on Netflix. Maybe this is not much in context with India, but there is this new movie called Moxie, and I think there have been a lot of such movies that have made attempts to bring forth this issue to the mass, through the mainstream media, so that it reaches the masses. And I think we would see a better version of this someday.
Let's hope
Right.
so. Unless it becomes a
Yeah.
token, unless, maybe watching movies is a fad thing to do and it's a token of being woke, as well, as you millennials call it. So I do not know. So it's possible that you watch it, you speak the lingo, and then you are still like your grandfather. I don't know. I mean, so it's possible. And I see that happen a lot. And then hence I'm saying, so there was a time when I used to joke that a guy telling that he's a feminist is like the most successful pickup line when he's amongst women who call themselves feminists. So the point is, like, are you being tokenistic or not? So I agree that films like these, and it's perforation in the market. Pink, for instance. So, for example, you spoke about Helaro. I went to watch Helaro, and so we were a group of 10 women, and interestingly enough, the theater was almost full of women. So you understand. Okay. So it is a woman-dominated movie, and it is made for the consumption of women. So you also have, for instance, we have 10, 15 years ago, Bridget Jones was written. Maybe more, I mean, So, and then immediately the term which stuck was chick lit. And the minute you called it chick lit, people thought, okay, it could be celebratory, but no, it was derogatory because, chick can never be celebratory. So it doesn't matter that she was smart, intelligent woman with her own insecurities as a modern woman. What was important here that it was by a woman for women. So it's very easy to compartmentalize it, isn't it?
Absolutely, I agree. Ma'am, so under the same discourse, I think in the beginning you mentioned how feminism is about equality and equity. Well, I think it's also important to distinguish between the two, equity and equality. Ma'am, would you like to throw light upon that?
Yeah. So Riddhi, I mean, like most of you, so you've done the first year course with me. So it will be like me preaching in the classroom, but I think it's important that one says that again and again. What is the difference between equality and equity? So equality would be, if I talk to you in terms of, stories or symbols. So you can't have a fish and a monkey give a same test because they have different kinds of capacities and different kinds of limitation. Equity would mean creating a system where inequalities as well as privileges are considered. And then hence, systems are equitable, which means that everybody, regardless of where they come from, have fair chances for opportunities. So that is the difference. So equality is more like a mathematical term to say that, okay, are men and women equal? So why should women get maternity leave? So earlier on in my career, many friends would ask me, so how do you justify maternity leave? So of course I justify maternity leave because women are the one to bear children, right? So because we are the one to bear children, there is unequal load on us, and hence we deserve and we demand maternal, paid maternity leaves, not just maternity leaves. I mean, what happens in most of our sectors is maternity leave is actually a break from work, and which is most of the time unpaid. So hence this, or for instance, why a different washroom for women, in workplace, for instance? Well, safety, sanity, security, etc., etc. Why should there be reservation in metros? ऐसे तो कहते हैं कि इक्वल है ना, तो मेट्रो में आपको सीट क्यों चाहिए? I may have my periods that day. I may. So it's not that we are brandishing the fact that we are weak. We are saying that there are days where we can be more vulnerable than you. But at the same time, if you are vulnerable, that doesn't mean you're not part of the picture. But the fact is that, equity is a system which identifies vulnerability in particular groups. So hence equity is more important than equality.
Right. Ma'am, you mentioned vulnerability and how, say, women would be more vulnerable on some days, perhaps. Ma'am, so I think around the same ideas lies toxic masculinity, where it's like if, say, a man was to be more vulnerable than a woman at some point in time, they wouldn't express it, or they would be hesitant in showing it because of the whole, the trope of, I don't know, mard ko dard nahi hota hai, and all of that, boys don't cry and things like that. Ma'am, what do you have to say to that?
I mean, it's as toxic as it is perpetuated. It's perpetuated all the time. And even though, I would say that there are woke parents and who want to kind of bring about very, very post-millennial kids, even then, this is like the direct thing that they want to say, that the minute a male child, a boy, is given to feelings, expressing feelings, there is a lot of discomfort that parents feel towards that. And, these were the sides which I was not aware before I mothered a son. And now that he's growing up, I also understand, for instance, a child may like pink, a child may like lavender, but, you let him wear it and he might be bullied. He comes back and tells you that, I'm not supposed to wear pink because my friends laugh. So what do you do as a mother? You say that they are, so those kids don't know what they're talking about, or you want to, attend to what your child feels. So I would say that there is no age limit when you can initiate these conversations with children. And I'm sorry, like it feels like I'm doing a parenting seminar, but the more I think of it, I realize that most of the conditioning happens in the first 5, 6, 7 years of one's lifetime. So what it means to be a girl, what it means to be a wife, what it means to be a mother, what it means to be a man, a father, a working person. These ideas are ingrained in people's brain, in children's brain. And we operate, as I said, throughout our life based on these. So what does toxic masculinity do? It perpetuates itself. And even when you believe in something, at some point of time, it also is very difficult to stand by it, because sometimes it's just, everybody versus you alone. You are the sore thumb. And, so would you want to be that person is another question you ask yourself.
Right. Absolutely, ma'am. That is so true. Ma'am, you also mentioned about maternity leaves, and I think very recently we've seen a lot of organizations even grant paternity leaves, right? So, or parental leaves, as they say, or, you don't want to gender that as well. I think in India also, do you think like we would see that happening more in India as we progress, say, in the next 5 years or so?
It's surprising that when you compare it with America, in that sense, at least in organized, let me repeat it, organized some government sectors as well as some MNCs. So I know of institutes I would not name. These are NGOs which work for women's health, women's empowerment. I know of many such who have fired their employees or given them a choice that you either leave or we hold your job till you are ready to come back after your baby is 3-4 months old, because they say we don't have the fund. So it's economics, but then it's political economy of gender, that how much are you willing to put it, how much are you willing to spend as an organization. And once you think that you can do away with it, because if you fire one woman, there'll be 20 women wanting to have that same job. When you have that privilege, maybe you won't care, unless there is an external force. For instance, government sort of mandates it. And the fact is, government would not mandate it or does not mandate it yet. Not in a, for example, you can fire your maid in a day's notice. Right? So whosoever has heard of maternity leave for your maid, or even during the COVID time, there was so much discussion about, maid nahi aa rahi hai, isliye my husband is cooking, maid nahi aa rahi hai, isliye my dad is doing the dishes. Fantastic. What is the maid doing? Are you paying the maid? How is she eating? How is she surviving? Are you worried about that? You're not, as a society, we can be, pretty immune to these questions. We can, we don't want to answer certain questions.
Right, ma'am. I think that is also especially the case when you're speaking from a place of privilege. You're going to ignore some certain questions. You say you're speaking from a place of privilege financially, or say you're a man who is speaking. I mean, it's always like if you have certain privileges, I think it's very important to acknowledge the fact that you were maybe say born with such a privilege. Since the day you were born, you had this privilege just because you were born of a particular gender. So I think once people just acknowledge that, maybe that there is this particular gap or this particular distinction between the two genders that is, say, cultural for now. Like I think that is an extremely important step, even in just identifying that there is a problem in this whole thing. And ma'am, I think just now we were talking about how
man-made in the sense, generically, it's a human-made institute with the kind of societal prejudices, liabilities, expectations which from borrowed from society. So even if we want to believe that we are holier than thou or we are in our own ivory tower away from society, that's not true. We have same kind of prejudices, same kind of inequalities.
Right, absolutely, ma'am. Ma'am, so I'm going to ask you, what are your thoughts on pseudo-feminism? I think these days we see a lot of people, saying things like, "Oh, you're a fake feminist. You're just saying this for the sake of saying it." And especially very recently, we saw that Myntra had to change its logo because I think somebody filed a complaint saying, they find it derogatory to women, and there was a whole conversation about it. Ma'am, what is your take on that?
I don't want to have a take on Myntra because that's between Myntra and the person who found it, objectionable. One would sort of also bring to attention the Amazon logo makeover that just happened because somebody decided that he looks like Hitler's facial feature. And I dabble in visual art, and I could say that one could subjectively, create any impression one wants to create because, there is this whole lens with which you're looking at something. But this whole discourse of pseudo-feminist, I find it extremely amusing. So when you call somebody pseudo-feminist, in your head, you believe that there is something called an authentic feminist. And I really want to ask that person that, can you list down properties of what an authentic feminist means? Because I cannot. For instance, feminism never meant one thing at any point of time. It meant different things for different people. It still means different things for different people. Okay, so there are Arab countries when people would say that we are fighting male gaze through hijab. Okay, and there are people in for example, our metropolis where young women would say that we are wearing skirts and we want the freedom to show our legs, and hence we are feminist. So I'm not berating or belittling any of these ideas. I'm saying that feminism means different things for different people. For some people, it is about getting access to money and everything so that they get to be beautiful, in conventional. For others, it is questioning the notion of that capitalized idea of beauty. So there are always different notions. So I could not question a woman who is heavily makeup or who chooses to do plastic surgery because at the end of it is her choice. Then choice itself is like Pandora's box. It is much more complex. And perhaps for that, we need another session. But yes, for pseudo-feminism, coming back to that, so even when we talk about laws, for instance, rape laws or the entire outburst of Me Too movement of that, how easy it is for any wayward woman or a crazy young woman to cast aspersion on austere, serious men of our country. Kya ho raha hai ye ladkiyon ko? So, but the fact is here, how these laws are misused is a great concern of the entire country. These laws based on rape, sexuality, even domestic harassment, so domestic violence or dowry. So misuse is a big problem. So my question is, there are all gamut of laws in the country. Why are we never bothered about these laws getting misused? So why are we always worried about pseudo-feminists? Because there are all kinds of pseudo. What are you? Are you a pseudo male, or are you a pseudo Hindu? Are you a pseudo Banya? Where do you draw the line? What is so? Why do we want to discredit somebody? So when you bring in pseudo, you understand that the person is only trying to discredit you by giving you that label. And I think that objection doesn't mean anything.
Absolutely, ma'am. That is so true. Ma'am, so along the same lines, I think Radio Club recently circulated a form where we asked questions about gender bias and things as such. And, we asked people to share their experiences. And we have a few responses from there. I'd like to read them out to you. Could you and these are people from DAIICT, and these are people on campus, and these are all anonymous responses. And I think I find some of them very amusing. So the first one that I came across was that, being a girl, I was denied to stand up for the BTech Fest committee because I would not be able to handle pressure and won't be able to talk or negotiate with vendors. And I think this is very sad, thinking that, something like that would happen on our campus. And I think people don't talk about this at all. And interviews have always been like, we don't really talk about what goes on in the interviews and things like that. And I think extremely like. Now, what do you think about this? Like,
I'm surprised that you don't talk about it, because I am not part of your student community. I see that happen all the time, right? And maybe it's easy for me to see it. And I'm not saying that this is particular of DAIICT. This is particular to, if I may call it, like, more mainstream technological institutes. It is true of largely that, because technology is primarily for men. Right? Because women are not supposed to study technology. If they are very good, they may do BA in arts and be a nice trophy wife and, hold nice high tea for. So you understand where it is coming from. The bias comes from there. So first of all, you're not even supposed to be here. You are here. We give you a hostel to stay. And it's a very tiny hostel, by the way, if you look at it. And out of 100 students, I did the math this time. So we did it in the class. So one student and a couple of students worked it out. They say 11% in this batch, in this particular batch, the first year batch, 11% are girls, right? So, and that's generally 12, 13%. That's about it. It doesn't go higher than that. So you're not even supposed to be here. एक तो तुमको बुला रहे हैं, and then you want to be part of everything. Are you nuts or what? So a few years ago, a student of mine who's passed out, by the way, she was part of your press club, and she had a very good chance to meet the founding members of the press club. And she was extremely excited. She was with other guys, but she was, I believe, the chief person who was carrying the interview. And she came back. She told me, ma'am, I can't believe, oh my God, I'm going live right now. So she was disturbed by some of the assumptions that these guys have, because they kept on complimenting her that, I can't believe that a girl is in press club now. That's such a big deal. She said, so she found that attitude sort of condescending. So hence I'm saying, so they come from, so generally I believe that most of the batch believes that women are here because of A, reservation, B, good looks, and they get better marks because they're rote learners. Obviously, because technically women are never going to make it. Most of you are rote learners. Most of you are here because of reservation of some form or other. Most of you get better grades because professors obviously are partial towards you guys. So that's an argument as old as universities. Since the time women are allowed in universities, we've heard these stories, and particularly in science and engineering. Much more than, so by the time I came in my college, I believe we had a thriving number of girls in the class, and I believe boys were in minority. So we never sort of had that problem. But particularly in STEM subjects, it's still the case. So you are second grade citizens, and you better accept it, Riddhi. Stop fighting. Stop this podcast right now.
Absolutely. That is, yeah, I think I've seen that a lot, even on campus. I think, but people do not, I don't know, people just don't make conversations around it as much, because, of course, there are much more important things to talk about. Is this even a real problem? Is what, like, some people just say that, it's like,
reservation in jobs is such a big problem, right? So, time and time again, boy, this is so unfair, ma'am. Why do some companies take more women and they have a quota to fill, and that's so unfair to us. That's so unfair to the idea of equality, But then I bring in equity, and then what happens to the whole complaint? But then even then they think that this is unfair. This is absolutely unfair. And you know what? You spoke about, some time ago you spoke about privilege. You said that, we need to be aware of our privilege. Riddhi, people are aware of their privilege, but, as a result, you have entitlement. So, and when you point that out, it's a very painful conversation. When you point out, and not just men, women, men, women. So we all are entitled, based on, and that's exactly why people say that you can't just have very, binary sort of, conversation about it. So then there is this whole idea of intersectionality, that there are different areas, through which you and your experiences come out in life. So it could be, for instance, in talking about India, there is class. You can be economically very affluent, and if you are a woman and suppose you are a Dalit, then what happens? Or if you're handicapped, or physically challenged, or you are non-affluent, then what happens? So based on these combinations of what we call as the lottery of life, at the end of it, it's a lottery, isn't it? We don't really realize that it is a lottery. So if life has been fair in more than one respects to you, you'll have a very different experience. And if it has not in more than many categories, then it's going to be a very different story for you. And education, is supposed to make you aware of your privileges. It's possible that you may have struggled in certain areas. It's also possible that you may not have struggled in certain areas. So if men have struggled because of something or something else, they have not struggled because they're women. Okay. So if you're a woman who comes from a moneyed class, you may struggle in a different aspect. So every story is unique. That's one thing. So what education should really do is impart that one knowledge that everyone has a story, everyone has a different baggage, and one can only be a little empathetic, So I believe that in one of our group chat, I think one of you, I don't remember the student, so he said, okay, so is that all? To be nice, is that what we can do? It's such a counterintuitive idea, right? So I'm saying, yes, let's begin by that. Is it too much to ask? Is it nice is not even a word I like, but I would say let's begin by being empaths. Does that kill us? Let's imagine how does it feel to live certain people's life, different person's life, and then you realize how perspective changes. Then you question your privilege instead of sitting on the high horse of entitlement. I deserve the job in Amazon, she doesn't. That's entitlement. Okay, and then they know they're pretty aware of their privilege. That's exactly why they're talking like that. So getting aware of the privilege, yes, but then the next step is to be aware what it means,
Absolutely, ma'am. That is very true. Ma'am, so another response that we had was men can be sexually harassed too. It should be taken seriously. One of my friends shared a story about how he was sexually harassed in a train. Instead of being supportive, people made fun of him. Men are considered automatically guilty when women register a complaint, and suicide rate is much higher in men because of such issues.
Yes. I mean, I'm so glad you brought this. So, this is a survey just done long ago. It said that 1 in 3 children, like 1 out of 3, according to that survey, 1 out of 3 individuals, this is regardless of the gender, have been molested as children, have been sexually abused as children. The rate is that high, and suddenly you realize that you're not that special, So the chances and this is India, this is India we're talking about. So chances are that you were molested regardless of the fact that, and it's also possible that with women perhaps parents are slightly more careful. With male children they are not, because they think ye to ladka hai, but it doesn't happen like that. Men, boys are vulnerable. They can be sexually harassed. They can be sexually abused. They can be raped. All right. So, I don't understand why would anybody be shocked at the idea, but that's exactly what patriarchy does. This idea that a man and his body is invincible. You brought this up, right? Mard ko dard nahi hota. So that creature could not be abused because being abused is a sign of vulnerability. Being vulnerable is feminine attribute. Masculinity is only about, becoming a hard person, a strong person, and a strong person cannot have these weak chinks. And hence, you can't really share. What is this issue with men can't, or not able to share their feelings? I mean, don't you think that's a problem? As a human being, as children, do male children cry less than female children? It's not that, right? So at what point of time do we decide that men are supposed to repress their feelings, their emotions? When are they so and since that time, I do not know, I believe it's that series of repression that make men's depression is not really spoken about. And I know so many men around me, they are depressed, but nobody talks about that. Women's depression is spoken about, and we speak about women and their hormones. Men and their hormones are not spoken about. So why aren't we doing a disservice to? I mean, isn't patriarchy doing a disservice to its own proponents in a way? So that's exactly why we say that it is toxic. It's not good for anybody.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely, that is there. Ma'am, so another response that we got is that a lot of the time, the people who discriminate don't even realize that they are partaking in these activities. It comes off as natural to them.
What is natural? You are in water, and you're a fish in a water, and you don't know what water is. You are in this layer of oxygen, and you do not know air because you don't really see air. You're part of it. So you naturalize it, you normalize it, right? So when you normalize something, you can't see it. What they develop what is called as blind spot. We all do, right? We all have our own cultural, like idiosyncrasies and only outsiders can see that. So yes, it is, when they discriminate, it is natural. When they're condescending, it is natural. Or sometimes it's people don't even think they're sexist when they say things like, I'm so proud of you, Riddhi. You're like my son. Okay. So you may have heard this, and you may have heard this from people who are very proud of you. And you may not have been comfortable hearing this because you're like, why do you need to be a son to be, or when a boy is taking care of, so the moms, I've heard moms say that this one is like my daughter because I really wanted a girl, but I didn't get a girl. So this one is like my daughter. That's why he takes such care of me. So you understand, you engender caring. Human beings are supposed to care for each other. A son can care for his mother. A husband can care for his wife. So why is it, or when children go to the father and say, I want to go to the toilet, it will be women around who look at each other and smile that, oh, he's the mom. Right. So, like amazing. So so it's like I have opened this whole new world after becoming a mother, that I realized that how it's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. These little things that we tell, these platitudes that we use, we are not aware of it.
Right. Yes, ma'am. So another response that we got, rather discreet. It says physically strong, safety, and no periods, and how safety is considered a privilege. These are all attributes of a man. Oh wait, I think this is a response to the question that what are some advantages of your gender, and I think this is a male writing this. So these are some of the advantages that he thinks are attributed to his gender. Now, what do you have to say about him considering not having to go through menstruation as an advantage, and how would you feel like as a woman?
So when I was in school, somebody, I think, no, this was my sister's friend. Okay, my sister's friend. She told my sister that when and this is, I don't know why they were. This was the age when kids were talking about that. So my sister was told that you are a woman and you menstruate because you did something terrible in your past life. So when men do terrible things in their past life, they are reborn as women. And as a punishment, you menstruate every month and you have this whole hellish experience of childbirth. And she came back, sad and angry, So, and the point is, I didn't know what to tell her because part of me really believed that it could be true. Because it's definitely, some parts are not very pleasant. And then the extreme opposite where, for instance, today I receive a lot of, Women's Day messages. And most of these said, oh, Nari, tu Bhagwan ki Murat hai, ya something, you're part of nature, etc. And I'm like, okay, so, either we are punishment for bad karma or we are, idol of divinity because there can't be anything in between. It's a mixed bag, isn't it? So yes, it's great that a man doesn't menstruate, which is fantastic, but then what can he do to people who menstruate around him? That's a good question. So yes, great, you won the lottery. I mean, in terms of, social lottery, ke tum admi, biological lottery, I don't know. Is it better does it feel better to be a man? Many women say that, particularly today, like I've been reading a lot. They say, I'm so proud to be a woman. I don't know. I mean, can I say that? Am I so proud to be? What does that even mean? Did I have a choice? None of us did. We accepted, So, I mean, it's okay if you have questions, obviously. But, well, I mean, cisgenders, I didn't have a choice, etc. So, can I say I'm proud? I'm proud to be the person I am right now. Yes, I'm proud that I'm a feminist. Am I proud to be a woman? There are times when I'm, disgusted by what's happening. I'm extremely miffed at the hormonal cycles that happens. Sometimes I'm in a different mood. Sometimes I'm in a terrible mood. So I'm like, why do I have these hormone cycles? So, yes. So as a man, you don't have it, but there are other issues, right? What do you do to people who are suffering through that? Sometimes we don't, it's not like we are martyr saints. There are days when we are perfectly fine. So what are you going to do about it? Is a good question, I believe. So yes, you won the lottery. What do you do about it?
Yes, ma'am. And on the other side,
they can be like smug. They can sit tight and say, "Ha, theek hai, abhi, I don't care. I won the lottery. मैं पिछले जन्म में अच्छा किया, whatever."
That's what, ma'am. That is what I was saying initially as well. This is a woman's issue. Like, why do I care? It's not my problem. Like, it doesn't affect me at all. Like, You do whatever you want to do. Yeah. Now on the other side of this, we had a female saying that an advantage of her being or her gender is that she has the ability to give birth. It was right on like the other end of the spectrum, saying, it's an advantage for me that I menstruate, and here is a male saying it's an advantage for me that I don't menstruate.
Absolutely. And people who, see, that's the whole thing. Motherhood has always been a very tricky issue with vis-a-vis feminist, right? So they were definitely, I'm talking about the second wave, 50s, 60s, when a whole bunch would say that motherhood defeats the whole purpose. And then there were others who sort of upheld motherhood and said that motherhood could be liberating too. And others say, look at the social scenario. Motherhood can't be liberating because at the end of it, whose responsibility it is. And then they would say, okay, we need to de-link biological motherhood and then, socially bringing up the child. But it doesn't really de-link in any in our culture in the given circumstances. So motherhood could be extremely liberating. The fact that you can create life out of your body, it is magic. It is absolutely magical. But what leads to that and then what happens later, it doesn't, it's not cute and nice as they usually show in media, in culturally. And then I can say that I can say that because many people when going through aftermath of birth, they have these questions that why am I feeling horrible? You're feeling horrible because many a times hormone kicks you into that bad place. So people are sort of celebrating the new child and you're like, I just want to be in a deep dark hole and not see anybody's face. Very normal, right? So yes, I would say that great that your friend, the one who responded that it is perfectly all right to think that. It's perfectly all right if she feels differently. It's perfectly all right if she still feels it when the time comes. So it is like magic, okay, but it's a mixed bag, as I would say. It has its own disadvantages, and we all know that, and it's magical also. Yeah, it could be both things.
Right. So another response that we got was not actually gender discrimination, but if I were a guy, I wouldn't be going through this. Context, I am a girl of age 22, 2016 batch. Since lockdown started last year, I left Bangalore and started working from home. So currently, I am living with my parents and I am expected to do certain things around the house, which take up a lot of energy and leave me feeling tired, which also affects my work. The guys I work with only come out of their rooms for lunches and dinners. Hence, their productivity isn't affected much, whereas I need to do several things around the house in addition to being available for any extra help that might be needed.
Yeah, unequal distribution of work. It's an old story.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you say that? See, even now, I do realize that even for students, and these are students who are at, so this woman, this student of yours is obviously an intern perhaps, right? Or perhaps she's working. But there are many students who I know that are juggling with household work and with, by the way, so I had these, intimate group discussions with students in the evening because I wanted to know them because it was an online batch. So I remember a discussion with one boy, like a male student, and he said that it was extremely difficult for him to do anything productive in the semester because his mom was unwell and there was nobody else to take care. So he was doing everything. So there are these exceptional circumstances also. And you also, it's also possible, so when I was growing up, I don't know if you know this or not really. So we are three sisters. So like I'm the eldest, and our family is pretty much orthodox. So we were three. I'm the eldest. So according to plan, I should have been married by 18, and so on. So because that's what happens when you're eldest of the three. So but at the same time, my parents were those who dared to be different, and I now understand what a big thing it was then. So they would never. So we didn't have any chores to do. So good thing is we could study. Bad thing is we were terribly entitled. Like extremely entitled. So yeah, so which also meant that then my mother had to bear the burden. You understand that. So domestic work is such a big issue, and we really don't have a solution for it. The only solution is that men need to be equal participants in it. All members of the house need to be, all adult members of the house, even children to certain very whatever extent, degree, need to be equal participants of the household, or we unduly use the cheap labor that India provides, don't we? We survive because of that.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I think now we'll take up some questions from the audience. I see we have a few things in the chat. Um, so, okay, this is okay. So somebody is saying, recently a Supreme Court judge said no matter how brutal the husband is, can intercourse between a married couple be called as rape? Ma'am, would you like to weigh in? Is the question.
Now, what I would like to say would not be part of polite conversation with you. So to this, so I've written something about it, and I feel very strongly about it because and this is the supreme, and it's. I would have been okay with it, or anybody would have been okay with it if it's somebody talking somewhere, which is internet throws up all kind of junk. The person who spoke this was the sitting Chief Justice of India. So when this person who's supposed to be the epitome of justice says that, where do you run? Where do you seek shelter? So I don't even know how to begin to respond to this. And the saddest part is, and this is something which I was discussing with my professors also, that ever since I was young enough to understand what rape means, I have heard these judgments. I've heard these judgments from family court, district court, high court, special court, where judges would say things like these, where judges would say, will you marry the victim, or ask the victim, will you marry the rapist? Agar tum karti ho to usko chhod dete hain. So I've been hearing that, okay, and when in 2012. That I think that was the first time in my lifetime something in that scale happened. People were in the streets, women were in the street, men were in the street, wanting better, speedy justice for women. And then you look at it, nothing changes. Institutionally, structurally, nothing changes. So it's okay to have these laws, and I always say that devil is in the detail. Law is how you implement it. And when and even this, when people say this all the time, that, oh, law is for women in this country. Ye desh mein to sirf auraton ke liye kanun bana hai. If you actually go to the courthouses, you are dealing with men like these. You're dealing with lawyers like these. You're dealing with entire system which not only internalizes, but it propagates, I don't know, misogyny. This is misogyny. This is heights of misogyny is what I could say.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, so we have another question. Ma'am, could you please explain the difference between equality and equity again, if possible?
Yeah, or one, I could forward you a video because it has visual, so that would be better. But yes, I mean, to kind of explain it to you, when there is equitable circumstances, a privileged person could be asked to give away his privilege. Okay, so that he comes, that does not mean that you're reducing somebody's stature. That only means that the person who needs it would get that privilege, and you would not get extra privilege because you're already privileged. That's what equity system means. So there wouldn't be any fee waiver if you belong to a rich family. You understand? You get scholarship only when you deserve scholarship, is an example. So scholarship is not, it's not equality, right? Scholarship is actually not about equality. Scholarship is, so in that sense, it's an equitable system, or at least it wants to be an equitable system where only those who need money get it. So does that make sense?
I think so, ma'am. Ma'am, another question that we have is, so I was part of a very abusive relationship a year ago. I was willing to share my feelings with my friends, but they had already sided with the other half because she was a girl, and thus for them, it implied that she won't do any such things. Ma'am, what is your take on this?
It's the same kind of scenario where you don't believe that a guy could be abused. You can't believe that a boy can be molested or a man can be raped. It's like you, in your head, victim looks like her, victimizer looks like a he. So if you want to look at, so we studied, actually, this is Professor Vinita Desai and I. So we read the guidelines, the guidelines which UGC follows, which is the Gender and Sexual Harassment Act. So we read it through, and this is something which is upheld by UGC. And throughout that document, you have very, very gendered language. There is he and she. If he does that, she could ask the women sell to help her, blah, blah, blah. So it was so stark. And Abilita and I, we both sort of, decided that for DAIICT, we will have a gender neutral language. This will not do. And this is something which we, repeat, and we insist that just because you are a he, it doesn't mean that you cannot be abused. Just because you are a she doesn't mean that you are. You understand? So, well, this is another example of equity, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. I think that makes it much more clear, the equity and equality difference. Yeah. I think that is it from the audience. Oh, okay, we have one more question. Okay, so somebody's asked on the live stream, where would be the best place to start a dialogue with regard to feminism within a familial setting or an educational one?
Try doing it in your familiar setting, and then you understand how uncomfortable you are. I did that as an experiment, and I continue to do that. But it's I would say it's still worth it. You would be called all sorts of names. The first thing which usually happens in Indian scenario is they'll say that ज़्यादा पढ़ लिख गए हो, पढ़ लिख के दिमाग खराब हो गया है, बड़े लोग कह रहे हैं चुप रहे. So these are very, very standard stock response which may be thrown at you. But no, seriously, where else do you start? You can't start in Mars. You need to start in your home. It begins at home. It begins with your family. If you are going out with your girlfriend, or you're going out with your boyfriend, go Dutch. For instance, where do you begin? And I'm just giving you, where do you begin? This is where you begin. Or you have an understanding that somebody has financial issue, then you deal with it that way. But don't take these things for granted. Don't take these stereotypes for granted. If very soon you'll be getting married, or if you want to get married, and it's not even like, one end of life is not that you should get married, by the way, it's a choice, obviously. So if that were to happen, then there is a whole question of dowry. Okay, so my first teaching job, and I won't name the institute, but it is one of the best institutes in India. So I was teaching in that institute, and I asked my class, and this was a point blank. This was not an online survey or anything. This was a show of hand. And I said, be honest, because it's not going to go anywhere, right? So will you accept dowry? Okay. And most of them said that they would. And I said, like, how? Well, like, how or why? They said, but ma'am, it's not in our hand. So some of them said, played the victim, saying that it's not in our hand. Our parents went so much for put us through this, and this is at least something that we can do for them. Say later, I deserve it because I worked so hard for this. So they were, and I'm not making this up. This is one of the best institutes that you can think of. And I also know of people who clear IAS, like UPSC exams, and then there is this joke, when you belong to certain parts of India, they say that the minute they know that your son clears the exam, they come with a blank check. So they actually come. That's so dramatic. Sometimes I love the dramatism in the story. They come with a blank check, and then they say, "Bhari aapko jitna karna hai," because basically, beta hamare naam kijiye. So that's pretty interesting. That's where that's normal for you. That's normal for you. So now when I say that, okay, so but what happens to women if they study? Aren't they studying? But then these guys, and I really like that conversation because there was this authenticity, right? They were not hypocritical. At least give that to them. They said, but who is going to make that change? Why should I suffer? Because things have changed. I said, no, you will not suffer. On the other hand, your wife will also be an engineer or whatever, and she will also bring in the salary. But why should we be the one to change? Because why should it start from us? And I said, why not? So that's the whole point. Are you ready to give away your privilege? You're aware of it, but are you ready to give it away? Or are you ready to give away your entitlement? Privilege so chalo chhodiye. Privilege hai. Are you ready to give away your entitlement? And then perhaps it's too personal then. Or forget about dowry, okay? Most of you say that we are not hooligans, we don't take dowry at all. Hum shadi karenge, theek hai, very good. Aap shadi karenge, you will expect the girl's parents to pay for the whole party, okay? If you actually do the math, you realize the girl's father will blow away almost his entire lifetime saving on 2, 3, 4 day wedding. I don't know how long these weddings are these days. On that fancy long party, and the money's gone. By the way, your parents won't chip in. Boys' parents won't chip in. So talk about where you start. You start with that. First of all, what is this circus with great Indian marriage? I'm sorry, I absolutely rant in my family, and everybody hates me for that. I have my young cousins, and I tell them, क्यों करना है तुमको? I mean, शादी नहीं करो. It's your choice. But why do you have to blow up your money? Why do you want to do that? It is their choice, because anyway. So why do you want to call 1,000 people? And you understand there is economical cost, there is ecological cost, etc. But if you want to go that way, why don't you go Dutch? But that's too revolting, isn't it, for us? So when you make these changes, then you say, or at least start talking about it to the family. 2-3 baar tumko, डांट पड़ेगी. Then maybe they'll, I don't know, maybe something will happen. I don't know. Yes, and then talk to your friends, for instance, when there are sexist jokes shared, sexist jokes are shared every time, like stand up. Say that it is rubbish. Stop doing that. When group of boys, group of friends are assassinating character of a woman, stand up against it. Or group of girls are making fun of a boy, calling horrible names, stand up against it. When certain languages are used, stand up against it. So as I said, will you be that sore thumb? Will you or will you just go with the flow? That's your choice. But if you want to make a difference, that's how you begin.
Absolutely, ma'am. I think, and once you are the sore thumb, I think people around you might perhaps realize that it is, it's affecting them as well, and they might want to be that as well. And I think after a point, you can't have too many sore thumbs. There's going to be a lot of people who believe in the same thing, and perhaps we'll, I don't know, have a more equitable society. Yeah. I think that is it for the question and answers. Do we have any other questions on the live stream? Okay, I think we do not have anything.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Yes, there is one question in the chat.
Yeah.
Can you read it? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the question says, it does happen that when we get frank with our family, the elderly remind us that we've been fed by our parents, and so we don't have a right to choose what we really think or want. And if we oppose that, it's the responsibility of a parent to foster a child, and then again it leads to several issues. Then won't one really give up?
Living by one's principle is never an easy thing. Who said it's easy? I mean, I just want to remind you that even for something as simple as vote, women somewhere had to die. There were universities so that we can have bank accounts. There were people who sacrificed their life. It doesn't is that who you want to be when you look into the mirror, whom you want to see. Right? It's never easy. The question is,
Another question. I 100 test where schools going full were not. What is going on? Where is the equality? How does it help in equity? What
a glass of water from his neighbor and he takes her and he strangles her and he kills her and her body is found after 5 days. I'm worried about that. King was taken away from you and given to somebody else. I'm not even saying they were smarter than you are or more deserving or less deserving. Maybe take it up with Google. Maybe Google is making a statement, maybe it's being equitable. I do not know. I cannot comment. But I would say that every day, if even now when I go out somewhere,
in the sense that they need representation to a point where, because they do not have representation in such organizations. I think we've always seen that as we move up the ladder, we're going to have representation on the higher court, and I think that is the whole discourse that we had today.
What happens to those girls who are taken in? To be pointed out again and again that you are tokens. We're talking about feminism to the F word, but if you were to be brave enough to do a C word, and which is the caste word, that would be a different story, So, and this is something which happened to our Instagram account a few months ago. So we got a Instagram account, students' achievement. So how does it feel to be that person? That's another story.
Down, it like you said, it discredits the person for who they are, right? Okay, I think that is. I'm not sure. I think that is it for the questions that we have today with us. Else have any other questions that you want to ask? If there is something on the line, I put it up here as well so that we can talk about it. Okay. I think this is it for the question and answer. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Great. Okay, so ma'am, before we wrap this up, I would like to take a moment and wish you and all of our female viewers of Women's Day. And I hope that we continue conversing about the F word of the 21st century as and when we get a chance to, or maybe we make that chance for ourselves and talk about it and converse about it. Ma'am, do you have any